Well, I think that means it's time to move up to the championship, and that means we've got one more pre-recorded segment for you featuring Monterey Bay.
Week, another win for Monterey Bay, who continue to play their style and develop patterns that aren't always the prettiest, but are certainly effective. You saw that on the first goal against Colorado Springs, a rather direct sequence that starts with a real sense of flow. You see Joel Garcia, the left back, receiving, and the furthest player forward is actually left winger Luke Ivanovic. But because of that setup, because of the sense of positional awareness, Monterey is able to settle in the final third, work their patterns, get Elijah Paul making a back post run, and therefore opening space, drawing the defense, and letting Adrian Rebelar follow up with the secondary move that lets him head the ball in. This is the sort of play, the sort of organization that makes Monterey so effective.
I mean, I'm drinking so much Monterey Kool-Aid that I'm drowning in it, but I'd love to get anybody's thoughts on this team right now.
I think there's something about Monterey Bay that allows them to, because we have to give Colorado Springs credit in this game because they did create a lot and they probably on balance deserved more from this. And I think that's the credit to Monterey Bay is they're able to nullify teams that are on paper and maybe even sometimes on the field better than them. But they do eliminate them because of the way that they approach these games, and they're able to sort of neutralize some of the advantage. I think the way that they've set up is an acknowledgement of what they have. They play a style that fits the players and the personnel that they have. And it just seems to maximize like every single person on the field. To make them sort of greater than the sum of their parts. And that's not a knock on Monterey. It is like I think there are many teams in the championship right now struggling with this exact concept of how do we get the most from what we have. So yeah, credit to Monterey Bay for going into Widener and getting, or no, this is at home, my bad. But
yeah, at Seaside. Yeah.
Credit for withstanding the barrage, I guess, from Colorado Springs, who are still a very good team, but Monterey Bay able to nullify them in the important moments.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Monterey Bay team who I think just saw our bulletin board material from them from our preview show and said, we're going to prove this, the USL show wrong. I don't know why it crossed my mind earlier today that I had said when Monterey Bay plays Miami on May 4th, one of those teams will not be in last of their conference. And it's looking like that prediction is going to come true as Monterey Bay is very much, as Kaylor is saying in our chat, it's moved into the party of being a playoff contender. We're still kind of waiting to see if this is a Monterey Bay team who can kind of keep this up for the remaining 30 matches of the year. They do have a very big game in the midweek next week against New Mexico, a way to kind of really determine on where this Monterey Bay team is going to kind of lie within the rest of the Western Conference. But yeah, they just continually find a way to get a result.
Yeah, I'm just going to say for the record, I've picked Monterey Bay to win for all, except for this Colorado Springs one. I thought was going to be the one where they finally saw a first loss. And a few weeks ago, I asked everyone if Monterey Bay was for real, and it was met with some skepticism. And it seems like now might be moving into that for real category.
Yeah, I mean, a really disingenuous way to frame this win for Monterey Bay is top of the table Monterey Bay sees off plucky 9th place Colorado Springs.
Or defending champs, you know.
But yeah, who would have thought that, you know, even a few games into the season, you'd see Monterey Bay at the top of the West and Sacramento like down towards the bottom. So yeah, bit of a weird start, but this Monterey team has certainly made waves early on.
Phil, are you worried about Colorado Springs at all? Because I see the goals they allowed. I've seen the fullback play all season. Matt Mahoney kind of switched over to the left side of the back line in this one. Chambers may be feeling some heat on the back of his neck with the way he's managing right now. Does that make you feel anything about the switchbacks?
Yeah, I think we talked early on that the wings were going to be really important for Colorado Springs, especially, you know, given Damas's like departure, they were going to be reliant on the wings, both in an attacking sense and by virtue of relying on the wings in an attacking sense, you become vulnerable in transition moments on the wings. And I think we've seen a lot of other teams. I may or may not be talking from my own personal trauma associated with poor defending on the wings from my particular club. But I think, I think they just haven't gotten the balance right. And unfortunately, the output from their wingers, Hanya has not really found his gear yet. And he's definitely been asked to step up significantly. They haven't really found, I think, exactly how it's meant to work between Hierman and Lee. They're trying a bunch of different pieces. And I don't think he really knows yet how to get the most out of that. And unfortunately, it means other pieces like Marco Micheletto and others are kind of trying their best to find exactly what their role is in this squad. So I think there's a lot of pressure on Chambers to figure out exactly what he needs this team to do and get them doing it pretty quick.
And Kaylor noting from the sidelines here that the importance of Speedy Williams holding that team together. I liked what Marco Micheletto did in the number 6 spot quite a bit offensively, but he's not speedy in the defensive phase of the game. And I think that's going to be something important to watch. Speaking of a team that does not have a sense of defensive organization, we got to talk about Phoenix Rising, who allowed 3 goals at the death against Detroit City. Honestly, one of the most incredible jaw-dropping comebacks I've ever seen covering and watching this league. Credit Detroit. I don't know what's happening in Phoenix, but I would love to hear about your thoughts.
I mean, what a match to have on USL After Dark for Galasso for this one. I mean, to have those 3 goals scored in essence 4 minutes to come back and get the result here is just a tremendous performance for Detroit City. As Soccer Night in Detroit says, just what a Saturday night for DCFC.
There was a real feeling in this one of I don't know if I've ever seen a game sort of regress to the mean that quickly, where Detroit definitely did not deserve to be trailing 2-0. And all that being said, when the goal goes in, 87th minute or whatever, the first goal goes in and you're consolation for Detroit, still GG's. When they score again, you're wow, that is really great for them to escape with a point. And when Cedeno hit the winner, I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen the air sucked out of a stadium quite so aggressively. But it was dead silent aside from the handful of traveling Detroit supporters. It's not obviously Phoenix just we talked about Tormenta not being able to be involved in a normal game. What Phoenix has been involved in some wild matches. And this one, unfortunately, they were on the wrong end of, so used up some of their good karma, I guess, in some of the other results. But I think for Detroit, there's something about I don't know, maybe a level of belief in this team where many teams at 87 minutes are 2-0 down. There's really not much to play for here. And the fact that they just kept going and actually got the reward for that is pretty impressive. But for Phoenix, they won't enjoy the tape. Watching the tape back early this week.
Yeah, and Kaylor noting that he thinks Cedeno might be in his early all USL team. I think his positioning and the way it changed over the course of the match was absolutely crucial to the way that Detroit improved. Playing quite deep in more of a narrow midfield 3 defensively early on. And it just gave Phoenix too much time and space on the ball to really dictate where the match was being played. And that changed coming out of halftime. Cedeno much more of a proper forward. Ryan Williams and Jay Chapman, who I thought were terrific in the pivot, allowed themselves to get forward again and deny Phoenix those passes up the middle that are their bread and butter. You pair that with Amu Mensah crashing upfield, Darren Smith and Ben Morris coming off the bench. It was the mix of the fresh legs, the adjusted tactical approach, kind of everything you want to see from Detroit City late in the game. And some of it is just belief. Some of it is Phoenix Rising absolutely refusing to close down. It's a bad mix right now. I do feel bad for Paul Mudoka and the project. It felt like the win in San Antonio was a statement and something that could really kick off the new era and say, we're done with these games where we keep getting out to early deficits. We're going to really stake our claim as a team that can make noise in the West. This feels like a setback in a way that matters more than your average early season result.
From the Detroit side, they'll now officially go with this result. They'll now officially go a calendar year without losing a road match against a team in the Western Conference, which is very impressive from their front. But if you're looking at Phoenix Rising, their next games are not easy. I mean, you'll have Tulsa in the Cup tomorrow. Then you get Sacramento, San Antonio again in the Jägermeister Cup. Then road matches against Colorado Springs, New Mexico, Monterey Bay at home, Las Vegas, then New Mexico again, and that gets you to the end of May. That is a very tough stretch to kind of continue on this start to the season.
Yeah, tough times for Phoenix Rising. And the team they beat a week ago, San Antonio, also on a skid of their own, suffering what was probably the upset of the week, falling 2-1 to the Miami FC. The stat I love is that Miami has somehow beaten San Antonio in 3 straight matchups, which just feels like wizardry and devilry and whatever you want to call it. Watching this game, though, I was impressed by Miami's sense of balance and sense of structure, which is something you've not been able to say since the calendar read 2023, if we're being honest. I thought at the best of times under Antonio Nocerino, they were able to find Alan Gavilanis in space, and that was kind of their one offensive outlet. Now they've got 2 or 3 players in the form of Bonfiglio and Vasquez who can make those runs and be dynamic. They've got a sense of control in the midfield because of Mercado and Romero. The back line really came up and showed up in San Antonio as well. Bolo Akinyote, unreal, shutting down transitional moments. Dalton Knudsen getting on the scoreboard and doing the same thing. It felt like a team that maybe has playoff upside, which is crazy to say about Miami.
And can we talk about seeing some vintage Bill Hamid, the good kind?
Yeah. Thumbs up at the referee when he gets the yellow card.
It.
Unreal.
This was crazy because it was it felt like the first time this year that San Antonio wasn't able to, and maybe we're watching that happen again right now in the Open Cup. They weren't able to unsettle their opponent, which they've been able to do every game. Like up until now, they've been able to, at least in like key moments, they've been able to get the other team out of shape, get them like really sort of discombobulated and not playing their game. San Antonio wasn't really able to do that to Miami FC, which I didn't know that Miami had a game to be unsettled from, and they do. And then the other thing that was really striking about this was the goals that were conceded just don't feel like the sort of goal that you score in San Antonio. Like they getting beat to the end line and sort of like, a spilled like sort of deflection in front of goal and then a ball in behind and there actually being space. San Antonio just typically doesn't concede those sorts of goals and where they're, running back towards their own goal chasing. So yeah, I think credit to Miami they showed up with a pretty clear game plan and they were able to get one over what has been the form team, up until this point out West.
I mean, we're 5 matches played into the season, and Miami is not only not one of the last teams without a win, but they're above Tampa Bay in the table. This is the first time they've won back-to-back games across all competitions since Barbie was in theaters. So it's going to be really impressive to see where Miami kind of moves forward. Here they have a big match against Indy 11 tomorrow in the Open Cup, and then North Carolina, and then another rematch against a Tampa Bay team in the Jägermeister Cup next week, which is, I think you could put Miami on having a chance to get a result, maybe not a win, out of that match against Tampa Bay, depending on if the Rowdies can hire a permanent manager by then.
if you watched San Antonio lose to Miami and then Detroit City's comeback in Phoenix, is that the Barbenheimer of this past weekend? Where it ended with an atomic bomb of a winner from Cedeno?
Miami is really the Barbie of this league, like just all vibes. I love watching them play, if we're being honest, because there's a little bit of a sense of danger of they allow just too much activity in their own zone, but it's somehow working in their favor as of late. Long live everything that they're doing, frankly.
I've still developed a soft spot for the Miami FC.
Yeah, everyone's favorite team to love. Oakland Roots finally getting a win, which I think is huge for the psyche, everything in the East Bay. I loved how they did it in terms of the shape change. Oakland, when they've been at their best under Gavin Glinton, has run a back five. That's been the system. It's given them the bodies they need at the back, but also allowed some of those very talented center backs to adventure forward without that throwing off the whole structure. And they went hyper direct against Tulsa, but they showed some of that classiness. They understood the moment. Wolfgang Prentice looked like a man possessed running behind that back line. I think they took advantage of a Tulsa team that was missing Arthur Rogers and maybe came in overconfident. But hey, 3 points are 3 points, and I'm excited to see the Roots finally starting to get off the floor a little bit in 2025.
And just from a name perspective, like I've never wanted a player to be like all league caliber more than I want Wolfgang Prentice to be all league caliber. He's just one of those names that you want up, just being talked about often.
It's a funny situation because I think he spent like 3 or 4 years straight on loan in League One before finally getting a real shot in the championship. I love to see him thrive. We do have one more open floor item from Kaler on the Legion. He's glad that Eric Avila got a win in game 1. We saw what the Legion could be when healthy, but it was still time to move on from Tommy. Unfortunate to miss Kaler's thoughts in general about Birmingham, but I think that's a fair take. This game, execution-wise, it felt like there was a sense of flow in possession that we've often lacked from the Legion this season. I wrote about this a little bit, pointing to Sam McElhatton in the number 6 spot. I thought he was fine on his debut. Not great, not spectacular, but most importantly, he let Enzo Martinez and Kobe Hernandez-Foster play a little bit higher upfield, leverage the awesome technical skills they have in more useful positions. And for an El Paso team that I think has done well at plugging holes in the central areas when they feel composed defensively, that was a good counter that Birmingham had to be able to work through and find chances.
Yeah, I think the two key things that really struck me about this one was, first, like the midfield was one that we called out like quite early on in terms of Locomotive play with a 2, Birmingham were playing with a 3, and by nature of being outnumbered there, it requires work from the rest of the team to make sure that you're not feeling outnumbered in midfield. And I think in the second half in particular, Locomotive often felt outnumbered in midfield. And I think the big credit that I would give to Eric Avila in coming up against obviously a very seasoned manager in Wilmer Cabrera is that Avila did not hesitate to make changes when he felt they were needed. And the Tabor Ataka substitution in particular, like, I think changed the game in terms of like adding threat, getting people in behind Locomotive, and Tabor Ataka in particular, like absolutely menaced Wahab Akwe, who I think had a terrible showing. Brian Romero was not good either and concedes a penalty. But Wilmer Cabrera, on the other hand, very hesitant to make changes, and which struck me as very odd, given that it's a 3-match week for Locomotive. There's going to be a lot of minutes in the legs. They have a derby tomorrow, like in Albuquerque. So there's just a lot of, I think it was, from a managerial standpoint, I think Avila actually gets the better of Cabrera and figured out sort of how to get at Locomotive at halftime. They came out of the gates in the second half storming and really never looked back. little bit slight questions around like, did Daniel Carter's header like cross the line and all this sort of stuff, but all in all, like Locomotive punished for their mistakes the few times that they made those, and I think they were unsettled by the changes that Avila made. So credit to him in his full managerial debut. He I think had a very, very good showing.